Welcome back to the Ordinary Brave podcast. This is actually a part 2 series. We're interviewing Stephanie Wesco Deason as she has shared the tragic, difficult story that her family has faced while they were on the mission field in Cameroon. We left off where she had just pretty much was leaving the hospital after she'd been told that her husband had passed. And now she was making the journey back to the rest of her kids. I believe she had one of her children with her. And now she was making the journey back to the rest of her kids to have to deliver the news to them. Well, welcome back, Stephanie.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for having me back today. And my prayer as we continue through the story is that God will use it to be a blessing to someone out there who's struggling.
Yes.
All of our journeys are different. No two are alike, and that's in God's sovereign plan. And so as we go into this next part of the story, that's my prayer and my desire. I think I left off in the part 1 just talking about meeting with the doctors and having them tell us that Charles was with the Lord, and just the relief that came with that, but also the sudden sense of, what am I going to do? I have got 8 little children. Daniel was only 13. He had just turned 13 at the time. And so it was that stage of life where it's like kids need a dad, and suddenly God had just turned our world upside down.
Yeah.
And so over those next 24 hours, we were not able to get back to the kids. There was a lot of fighting that broke out between the Cameroonian forces and then the rebels that were there in Cameroon. And so we were kind of in a position of being hunkered down, so to speak. And I'm so thankful. Our coworker that was in the ar with us, he was such a blessing. He knew I had Charles to take care of my son. And so he was like, I'll stay with the body. And in Cameroon, you don't have a morgue the way we do as far as where they come get the body and all of that. It's left to you to take care of the body, to get it to the morgue. You have to do all of that yourself. And here he was by himself. And I remember him telling me later, he said, I didn't know what to do. And then all of these Cameroonian brothers in Christ showed up, and they said, would you give us the honor of carrying his body?
Oh, wow.
And so they carried his body to the morgue, which it was like God bonded us with them in an incredible way that day, just seeing their love. And the people that took us in that night, the organization that took Charles and I in, and they gave me clothes because my clothes were not fit to wear. They gave me clothes. They gave us food, just showed us so much love. And I'll never forget one thing that stands out from that 24 hours. Well, 2 things. When they took us back to the apartment where we were going to be staying that night, I remember Charles and I, we couldn't close our eyes. It was like anytime we closed our eyes, we were just reliving everything. Yes. We couldn't sleep. We were just in the state of trauma and shock. And so we just started praying. We were sitting there just hugging each other, and we started praying. And I had noticed there was a gentleman sitting off in the corner of the room, just sitting there quietly. But I didn't know who he was at that point. And we finished praying. And in Charles' death, God had flooded me with such a love for the Cameroonian people. And I had loved them. We had uprooted our lives. We had gone there. I loved them, but it was a different kind of love that God gave me in Charles' death. And I remember we were sitting there praying, and I remember just the Lord flooding me with love for whoever it was that had killed him. And it broke my heart to think of the fact that he would spend eternity in hell.
Wow.
And so I remember praying and asking God if there was any way that whoever, I think I called him Daddy at the time because I was praying with Charles, but that whoever had killed Daddy could come to know Jesus. And so we got done praying, and this gentleman that was in the corner, he was a part of the organization that had helped us, and they had put him in there with us kind of to be there as a mental support for us because he understood trauma. That was what he was trained to deal with. And I remember him looking at me, and he said, I am really confused by you right now. And I said, really? Why are you confused? And he said, you should be angry. You should be, and he listed off all these emotions. And he said, you just got done praying for the man that killed your husband. Wow. And he said, I don't understand. How can you do that? And
Only
so
God.
here we are within a couple of hours, and God, not that I went through the full gospel with him, but I got a chance to share Jesus' love with him and share with him why we had come to Cameroon and why I could do that. And it wasn't because of me, it was totally because of who Jesus is.
Right.
And so that was just a beautiful opportunity, even that same day.
Yes.
And I remember the ambassador called us that night, and he said, "We're here for you." And it was like this whole new chapter of life of people that I would have never met any other way, or that we would have never had contact with any other way. And so each step of the way, it was like God gave me a focus, and it was totally from him, but of, okay, this is our mission field now. This is where God's put us. And throughout that next 24 hours, we saw God do so many miracles, because here we were in a third world country, and we had all of Charles' paperwork within a few hours, which is unheard of in the States, much less a third world country. And so God just did all these things. And I remember sitting in offices of different, we had to go to all these different departments to get different paperwork for different things. And of course, so many of the people were so sweet and expressing their apologies, and they felt so bad for what had happened. And I remember looking out the window there, because Cameroon was in a state of civil war. And one of our Cameroonian brothers in Christ, who actually ended up driving us out of the village, I remember I saw him go out to this truck loaded full of Cameroonian soldiers, and he's passing out gospel tracts to them. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, this is an opportunity we wouldn't have had if all of this hadn't happened.
Right.
And so that the Lord gave me that perspective, and that gave me a joy in the midst of all of the pain to see that the gospel wasn't being stopped.
Right.
God's purpose wasn't being stopped by bullets. That God was greater, he was more powerful. And in the midst of that time frame of that same day, this would have been the 31st of October of that year, but I remember the police were looking over the vehicle, because we were having lots of interviews with different government officials. And I remember they looked at the vehicle, and then they're looking at us, and they're like, "None of you were hit." And we're like, "No." And as they were looking at the vehicle, and then our coworker was looking at the vehicle, and come to find out, we all should have been either killed or severely injured.
Yeah.
And God stopped those bullets.
Yeah.
And there was holes in all over where we were sitting, but there was no physical harm.
Wow.
And so the power of God was on display.
Yes.
And so those little things God gave me as tokens for good, tokens that he was there with us, even when we didn't see him. And it makes me think of the verses in Job,
Yes.
where Job says, "I'm looking for him. I looked all around me and I couldn't see him, but he was there." And so that's very much what it felt like. And so that evening, or afternoon, it was an evening, of the 31st, we headed back to the village. And I'm so thankful our coworker did not tell me the brevity. I knew we were obviously in a very serious situation.
Sure.
But he didn't get into a lot of detail at that point, and I'm so thankful, because I don't know that I could have processed it.
Yeah.
But we were in a very serious situation as far as a time crunch of needing to get out of the village. And so I remember as we're driving back, he told me, he said, "We're going to have to tell the kids, and then we have to pack up and get out as fast as possible." And so I was like, okay. And so I knew there was something serious was going on. And so that's
so
what
you
we did.
arrived, and like, what kind of time frame did you have to pack up?
We were out of there, I think, in less than 20-30 minutes.
Wow.
It was one of those, we got back to the village, and the kids, as I talked about before, the kids were with their coworkers, and they had taken them to our house, in that they knew we were coming, so they'd taken them back to our house. And I remember Daniel, he knew something was very wrong. He's that firstborn intuition.
Yes.
And he met me getting out of the car, and he said, "Where's Dad?" And he said, "Did he get arrested? Is he in jail?" And it's like, if only, that seemed like it would have been such a small thing in light of everything. And so we all went back down to the house, and I was so thankful my coworker, our coworker, was willing to give him the initial shock news so that I could be there just holding them.
Yeah.
And so there was tears,
Of
there was all the
course.
emotions. And then that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, was tell the kids, we have to stop crying.
Hmm.
You need to grab your favorite things, stuff them in your backpacks. We have to leave. And I remember Stephanie looking at me, and she's like, but we just got here. This is
Hmm.
home.
Yeah.
And that was one of the hardest things in life.
Yeah.
But God was faithful, and so there was we had Cameroonian Christians from the village that gathered around us, and we prayed together. And then they were telling us, leave. They didn't want anything bad to happen to them or us.
And y'all were having to leave because of all the unrest, or people were
Yes,
coming to search for you.
yes, it was not safe for us to be there anymore.
Hmm.
And so here we are. There was, oh my, I hadn't counted up, but there was 16 of us, I think, 15, 16 of us crowded in this teeny little van
Hmm.
with the few pieces of luggage. Somehow, my one son, Joseph, he managed
Yeah.
to get his Foot Locker, because when we had gone over, I had told the kids you can take a Foot Locker of your favorite things.
Hmm.
And so they each had their own Foot Locker. Well, he loved Legos as
Hmm.
much then as he does now. And somehow he managed to squeeze in his Foot Locker of his Legos.
Yes.
So that'll be a standing joke for a long
Yes.
time. But here we are. We're crammed in. There was kids sitting on the floor of the van. I mean, we're sardines. And I remember as we left that village, the thoughts going through my head were, if someone fires into this vehicle, who's next to the windows? Who's most,
Hmm.
like, my brain, and I didn't realize then what PTSD fully
Sure.
entailed, but my brain had gone already into that hyper watchful looking around mode.
Yes. Hmm.
And as we're driving out of the village, I'm like, we're sitting ducks. This van's labeled, but with a church name. I mean, everybody knows this is the church van. And I tried to pray, and
Hmm.
there was no words except, Lord, blind their eyes.
Mm.
That was the only words that would come to mind. So that's what I prayed our whole way out of that village. And God brought us through. We got to the roundabout where Charles had been shot. And I'll never forget the man driving us out. I still keep in contact with him, just the sweetest Cameroonian
Mm.
brother in Christ. And he started singing He Leadeth Me.
Mm.
And so we sang He Leadeth Me as we went over that spot where Charles had been killed. He had no idea that Charles and I had He Leadeth Me at our wedding.
Oh, wow.
And it was a God thing that song was almost like the beginning and the end of that chapter of my life. And that God was there the whole way. And so the Lord brought us out of the village,
Hmm.
and the Cameroonian military met us. I don't remember now, but they met us along the way. We stopped along the road and just waited for them. And while we were waiting for them, because they were going to escort us out of the English region where we had lived. And while we waited for them, Ben got a call on his phone, our coworker. And he came back to our vehicle, and he just had this look on his face. And I said, "What's wrong?" And come to find out, the village where we had lived came under attack within minutes
Oh, wow.
of us driving out. And I remember Ben saying, they were right there. They were right there. How did they not see us? And I told him what God had impressed on me to pray. The
Blind
only
their
words
eyes.
that had come. And then his wife looks at me and says, that's the only words that were coming to my mind.
Oh, wow.
That's all we could pray. Those were the only words. So to see the hand of God, it was like our own Red Sea.
Yes.
Like where we saw God do a miracle. And so
I feel like the Lord had been doing that for you all along.
Yes.
Just dropping those little, like you said, the tokens.
yes,
Of just revealing his presence and showing you
Yes.
where he was. And
that we weren't forsaken, that he was so faithful to keep his promises. And so those next few days were crazy as we got out of the English region. Missionaries helped us along the way. We ended up in mission houses in the capital and getting to meet with the ambassador. And we sang for him as a family. And he, in a creepy way, he looked so much like Charles had looked.
oh, yeah.
And so because of that, Caleb, because Caleb was 4 at the time, he just climbed up right in his lap. And it was like, it gave him this little sense of security for that hour or two that the ambassador was with us. And We still keep in contact with him. Like it was just like God gave us that special door of opportunity with him. And, we're so thankful for all of that was during President Trump's first term and all that his administration did to help us. Wow. And just so many people that stepped up to make a difference in our lives. Samaritan's Purse was involved. Just so many people that helped get us out of the country. And in the midst of that, I remember struggling because Charles, and it makes me so sad to look back and think this is what he thought. But he had told me along the way, before we went to Cameroon, he said, if something ever happens to me, you'll be left on your own. He said, nobody steps up to help widows and orphans. And he said, just know if that happens, you're going to be left on your own and you're going to have to figure everything out by yourself. And that breaks my heart now.
Knowing all that God's done.
Yes, that's what he had experienced in many realms. And so it's sad to me now now he's in heaven, so now he has the big picture, but it's so sad to me because we have gotten to experience so much more.
So let me ask you about Charles Sr. So yes. Is he buried in Cameroon or did he come home?
He isn't. We paid to have his body brought home, and that was again, we had to have our government officials involved. There was a lot behind the scenes that went on there. There were certain demands that the Cameroonian government made, and so while we were flying home, there was phone calls. I was having to answer phone calls from our government officials, and there was a lot that went on, but we did bring his body home, and praise the Lord, it was brought home like the day or two before his funeral, because for a while we thought we were going to have his funeral without him there, and he's in heaven.
Sure.
But to have that closure, so we ended up with a private funeral. We did a private funeral and then a public memorial service. But yes, we got home, and I was so thankful. Of course, we didn't have a home, we didn't have a house, nothing yet.
Yeah, because you had sold everything.
Yes. And so my parents let us. They had already planned, they're like, you can come stay with us for a while, and so. We looked at the house, put an offer in on the house right like the day or so before his funeral, and started that process. It's honestly, a lot of it's a fog.
I'm sure.
I was kind of in survival mode.
Step by step, yep.
Yes. And in the midst of those days, though, just the Lord made music. We loved music already. We sang together. But I remember I would wake up, and nights were torture. It was nightmares. If I could sleep, it was filled with nightmares and just all this awful. And I had this tiny bed, and then my three youngest wanted to sleep with me because they were obviously needing that security. So nights were not pleasant in any way, but I would normally fall asleep for a couple of hours, and I would wake up to a song on my heart. And that went on for several weeks, and it was like God's way of carrying me through. And some of them were songs I didn't even know. I would have to look them up. And what is the song? Where's the song from?
Right.
And just the power of God through music became so real during that time frame, because it was like when you're in the midst of that trauma and God wakes you up in a state of worship, that is supernatural.
Wow. Yes.
That is something only God can do. But it would give me joy and hope for the day. Just that sense of, okay, we can get through another day.
Yeah.
And
so now you mentioned, that Charles Sr. had said, it's going to be really difficult to live on your own. So tell me about how you just immediately started seeing God's outpouring of his people. And I mean, you're mentioning that already. He was giving you music and worship.
So before we even got back, I don't know who had started it, but someone started a GoFundMe. And because I was like, how am I going to buy a house for my kids? Like all of these. And then a dear friend of mine, she opened an Amazon account because she knew me very well. And she knew that there would be an influx of people wanting to help. But she didn't want me to have to deal with a bunch of stuff that we couldn't use.
Right.
And so when we came back, there was already this load of stuff already being piled up for our new home once we had a home. And that overwhelmed me. And when I saw the money that was coming in, I remember telling my dad and one of my best friends growing up, he's a pastor now, but he had come back from Ohio to help my family prepare for us coming and just help me through the journey of of life that first few weeks. And he helped line up to go see our house, and just, he was just a godsend. But in the midst of that, I remember saying to him, I have to send all this money back. This is so wrong. I cannot keep it. I would much rather be on the giving end than the receiving end.
Right.
And I remember he looked at me and he said, Stephanie, he said, this is God. He said, this is scripture. This is how God shows himself, is through his people.
Yes.
And he said, you can't turn away what God is doing. And that was honestly a very different concept for me. I had very much been in the mode of, I have to do this. And to have to be in a position where it had to be God. There was nothing left in me.
Right.
And so that was such a blessing. And so that enabled us. We were able to use that money to buy our house. And we bought a fixer-upper, which God used in our story. But we bought a fixer-upper, which to us, after being in Cameroon, was extremely nice. We had running water. We had electricity. And we settled in there. And wow, that first few months, I was thinking about it this morning. That first few months, it was like Satan was out to steal, kill, and destroy. I don't know any other way to put it.
Sure.
We were almost all killed with carbon monoxide poisoning in the house. Daniel and I had to carry out all the kids. They were already they were already gassed.
Passed out. Wow.
Yeah. I was diagnosed with liver tumors that they thought were cancerous. And the last test that they did, they said, we don't know what happened, but they're not
gone.
cancerous. Well, they were there, but they were not cancerous.
Wow.
And I was in 2 severe car accidents. One left me paralyzed on my whole left side, and I couldn't speak. And that was in 2020. And so I had to relearn how to walk and talk and do a lot of basic things. And so just like so many things happened over those first few years that it was like, God, what are you doing? But in the midst of that, I started getting some PTSD counseling, or had a PTSD counselor, because I was in a very bad, I reached the point where I can't hardly function because I'm so tired, because I'm not sleeping, and I want to be there for my kids, and I feel like I'm living in this mode that's going to kill me. And so I ended up getting some help for that, and through that, God opened a door for me to end up getting training to help others.
Wow.
And that was not what I would have ever seen myself doing. But for about 4 years, 3.5, I did that. I worked with different ladies and children, multiple forms of trauma, abuse, just God opened doors. I still keep in contact. I still work with a few ladies, but have contact with others that I helped in the past. And one of them actually wrote me this past week, and just this email just said, thank you so much. You changed my sister and I's life. And that made it, when I look
back, like you said, it gives it purpose. Purpose to all the pain.
Yes. And in 2019, God actually used this book to connect me with that girl, because somebody told her about it. And but in 2019, I had a lot of people saying, you need to write a book. And I was like, I am not a writer. And they're like, yes, you are. I said, no, I can't do this. And so it was a step of faith, honestly, and it was about a 6-month process to write. And but after it ended up being published right as COVID, about the same week shutdown hit, the book was published. And God used it to open doors to help others.
Well, why don't you tell us about it really quick? The title and how people can find it.
It's on Amazon. To Die is Gain. Finding Abundant Life in Death. And it kind of goes through biographical, autobiographical, through that first year of after Charles died. And there is so much more now. When I flip through it now and read through it, I'm like, oh wow, God has done so much.
Well, maybe we need a sequel.
Changing. Yes, that's a couple of my kids keep saying that, and a couple ladies from church have told me that. But I said, I have a 2-year-old, so maybe when he's a little older. But God's done so much. So this just kind of chronicles that first year of life after Charles died, the trials, the victories, the lessons learned. God had to do a lot of changing in my thinking. And not that I had it was wrong thinking, but it wasn't the best thinking for sure,
Sure.
on different things. And there's a lot that's not in the book, not because I try to hide stuff, but because my goal was for God to be glorified.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I put in the book is what I believed God wanted in the book.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more backstory that I share personally
Mm-hmm.
with people.
Well, I'd love to get into really like you said, you got a fixer upper,
Yes.
and that's kind of what brought you to a new
Yes,
story. So I want to
yes.
kind of, I
Get
want you to
into-
also share about how the Lord brought you Mark.
Yes. So we did. We bought this fixer upper, and I don't know what I was thinking. God had a purpose, though. Again, it's like that. And it was a beautiful, we had land, the kids could play, had a creek. And I'll never forget, one of the first things the boys told me, they were excited. There was a deer skull or deer skeleton by the creek. And they thought that was so cool. And so, yeah, we made so many good memories there, but it had tons of issues. I mean, that house was like a ticking time bomb.
And this
It felt
was in
like
Indiana?
Yes,
Okay.
northern Indiana. And a gentleman from our church, he ended up being our best man in our wedding, and he was one of Mark's, like a father figure to Mark after Mark's dad died. But he was the deacon in our church, and he took his role of taking care of the widows and orphans
Very serious.
very seriously. And bless his heart, he would come over different hours. I mean, I'd be like, there's sparks coming out of the electrical box. What do I do?
Yes.
Just so many. There was a lot of wiring issues. And he would come over so many times. Just one of the most sacrificial, godly men I've ever known in my life. And we called him Grandpa because that's what he was to the kids in many ways. He had known me my whole life, but just such a godly, sweet man. But Mark was a friend of his. And so he would send Mark, when Mark would come visit, he'd send Mark my way. And I should say, Mark, I had known Mark for a brief, I had met him once before we went to Cameroon. And he had come to Charles' memorial service. And the morning after, he had come to see me and the kids before he left. And he told me then, I love you like a sister, and I want to be here for you. Anytime you and the kids need anything, you just let me know. Well, I'm not a go to people and ask for help unless I'm really, really desperate. And so I had never contacted him. But Mr. Kagan was like, hey, Stephanie
She needs help.
Yes, she needs.
Well, and he's gifted with like
He is.
electrical
He's so
things
hands-on.
and,
He's just, he's such a hands-on guy. And so he started coming over. And then eventually Mr. Kagan's like, I'm just going to give you his number because then you can just contact him directly. And so our friendship kept growing. And in the midst of that, he started sending me scripture passages. And I asked him later, I said, what triggered that? And he said, I would just be reading or praying, and the Lord would impress on me to send you a passage. And so many of those times, it was just when I needed it. Yes, exactly when and what I needed. And that was endearing him to my heart. I'm very much, if you put time and effort into knowing me, that's like, wow, that says a lot to me. And so that was drawing my heart closer to his. And I felt so bad about that because I'm like, no guy is going to want to marry someone who has 8 kids, a widow with 8 kids. Who's going to take on our crazy bunch, And so our friendship grew. The kids knew I liked him. And I had, along the way, I'm working with ladies, and I had so many people say, oh, we'll help you find who you're supposed to marry. And it would kind of just like, ugh, I knew it was going to take somebody that God called. And that's to marry me with all of my issues. And then 8 kids, I was like, that is a lot to take on. And they had a lot of trauma that they were working through. And there's so much more to our story that I won't get on, but we just had a lot we were dealing with. And so I remember in 2022, I came to a point, some things that happened in my life and in one of my friends' lives, that God made me come to terms with some things from my past that I had vowed I would take to my grave. I didn't want anybody to know. Like, if people know this, I'll be trash to them. And God put me in a position where I either betrayed a dear friend who had been through some abuse, or I came clean and was willing to be honest on a very brutal level about things I had been through. And through that process, I told Mark, I said, God had to break that wall down before I could be willing to even like go head on, into another relationship. And so in the process of dealing with that, we had to file police reports. I mean, it was a gruesome process, but in the midst of that, my body reached a point of saying it was done. And I almost died.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that day, Mark had come over to help set up a bunk bed for the girls in their room. So he was there when I crashed, and when, the paramedics come and they're taking me out, and they didn't know what was wrong. They just knew something was very wrong because of my blood pressure and everything that was very off. And so after the whole hospital thing, the doctors were like, you have to stop what you're doing, i.e. no more counseling. You're pretty much on bed rest. Your body's at a very fragile spot. And some of that was, looking back, I jumped in feet first, headlong. I was going to get through all the grief and trauma by just working through it. And I've learned along the way sometimes being still has to be a part of that journey too. And so that was where God put me. It's time to be still. And so here I am, having gone through that, and I'm like, Mark will never want to speak to me again. He's for sure never going to, if there was even a possibility, well, it had the opposite effect. And he texted me while I'm on bed rest at a friend's house and told me he loved me. I want to be there for you and the kids. And he told me, he said, it took that for my stubborn eyes to be opened to what God had been putting in front of me all along. And so God used, again, something that was scary and very traumatic to bring us together in a way. So over those next few months, as a family, we're maneuvering this new chapter of a possible new dad in the picture. And God just, during that time frame, again, everything wasn't pleasant. We went through some shocking, we thought everybody would be happy for us, and we found out people had plans for my life and for the kids' lives and Mark didn't line up with those plans. And so we went through good growth pains of, okay, we're a family unit. This is what God is leading us to do. And our purpose here is to glorify the Lord and to heal as a family, not to make everybody around us happy.
Right.
And so we ended up getting married on the 4th anniversary of Charles' death. And we all agreed on that. And it was like the ultimate God bringing beauty out of ashes. And a year before then, on October 30th of 21, we had been in Pensacola, Florida. I was working at a missions conference down there. And that morning, I had just gone out on the Pensacola beach really, really early in the morning. And I said, God, I can't keep doing this. I cannot keep dreading October. I cannot keep dreading this day like it's the worst day, every year.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have dreamed that a year later that God would bring so much
that he would
joy.
turn it into something so great.
Yes.
And even since then, well, I grew up in a blended family too. And so I know, very blessed to have a wonderful stepfather who I feel like Mark loves your kids.
Oh, he does.
Like they are his own, and that's how I felt for my stepfather. But I also have a half sister, and we always say that she's the glue, that put it all together. And so tell us just really quick about little Matthew.
Yes. So we got married 22, and we didn't think we could have kids because of medical things. And then lo and behold, I think it's because Caleb and Emmy prayed. God gives us little Matthew in 2023, in September of 23. And he has been the most healing. He's like that glue. And I tell Mark almost every day, I'm like, we didn't know how much we needed him.
Yes.
And how much the kids needed him. And he is just like this little bundle of energy and sweetness and orneriness, and we joke he's a little teenager.
Yes. Well, he's growing up in a house full of teenagers mostly.
Yeah, God has been so good, and him moving us to Tennessee, oh my word, we didn't comprehend like the best chapter that was coming, you know,
Yes.
and bringing us to Stephen Street. Like God's just done so many things and has brought so much healing, even from 3 years ago when Mark and I got married, and not just for me and the kids, for him too. It's
Mm-hmm.
just it's been an incredible journey, and Romans 8:28, God gave me that verse.
He works all things good.
Yes, like
Mm-hmm.
I joke he like put it on my inside of my eyelids after Charles was killed of
Yeah.
just that's his promise.
Yes.
And he is doing that. And that doesn't mean that everything's perfect. It doesn't mean we still don't have growing pains and things God's
Right.
teaching us, but he is good. And to see the kids now as adults, you know, my
Mm-hmm.
oldest three are adults, and to see them wanting to serve the Lord, and you know, they're all different, their callings are all different,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm like, God has carried them through so much, and I
Yes.
have no doubt that it's going to make a difference in each of their, you know, own vocations and the paths God takes
Yes.
them on.
Well, as we wrap up here, what is what would you say to a woman out there that
Mm-hmm.
might be struggling, whether she's a widow or she's just experienced some kind of trauma?
Yeah.
Um, what would you say to her today?
Wow. Don't let go of Jesus, because he's not going to let go of you.
Mm-hmm.
He is faithful. His promises are always faithful, even in the dark. Trust him in the dark, because
Mm-hmm.
he is there.
Well, I love that scripture you shared about Job, because there are
Yes.
seasons, I know in my own walk, while my life experiences are very different from yours, you sometimes feel like you are in the wilderness, or like,
Yes.
I can't see
Yes.
where how you're working this out for your good Lord, but he is.
Yes.
And even though you can't see him, he's
He's the
there.
weaver, weaving
Mm-hmm.
weaving the pattern that he's created for our lives,
Mm-hmm.
and that image has helped me many times of the
Mm-hmm.
dark threads. He plans the dark threads
Mm-hmm.
in that tapestry that he's creating of our life, and it doesn't make them pleasant, but someday in heaven
Yes.
it'll make sense.
Yes.
And that's such a glorious truth for our family, of knowing, you know, sometimes the kids and I'll talk of, your dad's healed. He's healed from all the trauma he went through in his life. He's healed from, you know, the pain of just living
Mm-hmm.
in this world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that comes with its own set of, and he had told us, I don't think I mentioned in this in the first part, but he had told us if he was ever killed on the mission field, he wanted to be shot to death. He said
Oh
that would
wow.
be the
Yeah.
fastest, quickest way to go be with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And God even gave him his heart's desire in his death.
Mm-hmm.
And just so many things that we can look back now, and it's not a celebration of what happened, but it's a celebration of what we've seen God do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's beautiful.
It is. Well, thank you so much for just taking the time to share your story, and I think it's one that is really powerful.
Oh, praise the
And I
Lord.
think it is going to have purpose in people's lives as they listen to it. And I mean, you've encouraged me,
Oh,
even just
praise the
hearing
Lord.
your story and just reminding me of God's faithfulness, even in the hard.
Yes.
So, well, we thank you for listening to part 2 of our story today with Stephanie Wesco Deason. And if you are liking what you're hearing, or if this podcast has been an encouragement to you, we ask that you like and share the Ordinary Brave podcast, and we will see you next time.